rooted in a treaty. It needs to be owned by the two sides, but it needs to be run by neutral outsiders, and I'll talk about that more. And it needs to focus on the place, not on the people who happen to live or work in the place. So the special regime elements are the following, and I hope this will work. A treaty, a governance board, which is a board with Israel and Palestine chair, which includes probably 5 or 6 other countries or entities, probably the United States, possibly Morocco, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, EU, something like that. And that's the board of governors who oversees it, sets the high rules, and pays for it. Then you need to have somebody to run it, and if you really want an interesting job, apply for this one. We call it the chief administrator. I wanted to call it the great poobah, but they wouldn't accept that. So there needs to be somebody who actually is accountable, an accountable person with executive authority to run the thing. That person needs a special police service, and I'll tell you what that looks like in a minute. That person needs some municipal services that look after planning and zoning and archaeology and building permits and utilities and access to the place. And you need as well, and this is crucial important, you need to have a body that has the religious leadership, the patriarchs, the chief rabbi, the head of the Islamic Waqf, the mufti. There has to be a place where they come together, not only to talk to each other, but to ensure that on that great year, when Passover and Eid and Christmas all fall on the same day, there's somebody directing traffic and it will come. There's somebody directing traffic going on Easter, yes, perhaps Easter fetish. So those are the main elements. Now I'll go through is that it? Yes. And the final thing you need are some fairly sophisticated dispute resolution and legal mechanisms, because problems will come up. But this will need a kind of a very special way of administering the law when you're there. The governance board, just to look at it, as I said, it's the oversight authority. It allows both sides to claim victory and stave off defeat. Because with the special regime and the governance board, they say this belongs to us. It's such a sacred place, we put in something special, but it is ours, we own it. We're going to have some help from the Americans and the Saudis and the Jordanians and the EU and others, we're not sure who. And the Palestinian and Israeli members of the board give it legitimacy, and the international members give it sustainability. The role of the internationals will be to grease the wheels and twist the arms to make it work. The key functions are to choose that person to administer it, to set up the legal details, because we haven't been able to work them out yet, make sure that the senior executives are acceptable to both sides, and finance the operation. But they don't do the day-to-day work. If they do, there'd be nothing but trouble. The chief administrator has to be appointed by the board, so he is their creature. But his mandate is not given by them, it's given by the treaty. So he is their creature, but he is his own creature in another. He can't be an Israeli and can't be a Palestinian. It's got to be somebody from somewhere else. On bleak days, I say it should be the Dalai Lama with 7 battalions of Gurkha troops. And as I say, what this is about is the threats to peace. It's the threats to order. That's why you have it. So the job of the chief minister is, first of all, to protect the holy sites and guarantee appropriate access to them, not unconditional access. There are times when the Muslim sites should be reserved for Muslims. There are times when the wall should be only for Jews. There are times when the Church of the Holy Sepulchre must be only for Christians. But there's all sorts of other times when everybody should be able to visit those places. So, and somebody's got to be in charge of that, and that's part of the international, part of the third-party role. You have to be in charge of who comes through the gates, and then who comes through the gates of the holy sites. And you need to be able to provide security for everybody and safety for everybody, and equitable police and justice services. And he needs to manage things like access. Things like who gets to dig where and why. Things like the issuance of building permits and matters of that. The areas where the battles are going on right now. From the security point of view, we were really surprised with what our Israeli and Palestinian experts insisted on. We had imagined an international corps with a Palestinian wing for the Palestinian parts of the old city and an Israeli wing for the Israeli side. But the security guys on both sides said no, largely because of the bad experience that they had with joint patrols where people who've been patrolling together end up shooting each other. They said no, the cops have to be overwhelmingly international. Selected from countries that are acceptable to both, but selected on an individual basis, and therefore loyal to the paymaster, the chief administrator. You need, obviously, very close coordination with police and security services on both sides. But we drew back and we said, yeah, the last thing we want is a bunch of innocent Norwegian policemen walking into a family feud in the Muslim quarter. So they said, okay, well, we will agree to have unarmed Israeli and Palestinian police as part of the patrols, and they will deal with those internal issues. And those things where you need the cultural know-how. The guys with the guns will stay on the street. These people will go in and deal with the problem. Both sides were absolutely adamant that 0.9 kilometer needs to be arms-free, no private armies, no guns. People on military service leave their weapons with their own authorities at the door. Only the international police with weapons, and very limited weapons at that. And the Mounties, interesting enough, were insistent that there needed to be a community-based policing model and even a police monitoring board made up of Israeli-Palestinian residents of the city to provide feedback on how the cops are doing. So that's the security part. The legal system drove us crazy, and largely because we got lawyers involved. Americans, British, Israelis, Palestinian attorneys, and the moment they went to it became quite hopeless. But nevertheless, we were able to beat out some general rules. In general, a Palestinian living there will live under Palestinian law. In general, an Israeli living there will live under Israeli law. And for visitors, when you come in through a Palestinian gate and you get into trouble in the old city, you go back out through that Palestinian gate and you are handed over to the tender mercies of the Palestinian justice. And if you come through an Israeli gate and get into trouble, you go back out through those gates and the authorities are there. There would be there might be a case where a person appeals and says, no, you can't turn me over to those guys for this, and we'd set up a little tribunal to deal with that. For serious crimes, and happily, there's not that much serious crime in that place. The rules are very simple. If an Israeli harms an Israeli courts deal with it. Palestinian harms Palestinian courts deal with it. But when it becomes a cross-communal crime, it's more than a cross-communal crime, it's a threat to the peace. And there we imagine essentially a virtual court that is summoned, judges flying in from New York and Toronto and Morocco and other places, and there's a very public hearing or trial, and if the person is found guilty, well, they may end up being missed to the Italian government. But you have to have those intercommunal crimes done in a way that neither side can say, oh, well, we turn an Israeli over to the Israelis, they let it go. We turn a Palestinians, they let it go. We do the opposite, and the people get treated unfairly. So you need to have something special that comes into those, what I hope, what have already been rare instances. Now, the special regime is there because of the holy sites, but it is not about holiness. We had all sorts of brilliant international people saying, well, the special regime should settle on things to decide which is holy and which is more holy and which is holiness, and to grade the holiness of this or that. There were 3 holy sites in the old city in the year 1900. There are probably 500 or 600 now, okay? So, but most of them are not complicated. And we thought, the last thing the international community has to do is to tell the Armenians what's holy to man. They can figure that out for themselves, okay? And they don't need help from anybody else. So the job of a special regime is security, safety, public order. And which means you guard the perimeter, you don't police inside. That's for the religious authorities to do, whether it's on a ram or on a wall or it's church wall, etc. but you have these international police outside to deal with problems if and when they come along. They also have to make sure that what is called the status quo, loosely called the status quo, which are the written and unwritten rules about who gets to do what among the religious authorities, are enforced by the international regime. The sites stand their current custodian. There is no way that anybody should be saying to the Israelis, well, you know, we're giving the wall to somebody else, or you know, those sorts of things. It does not work. You have to leave the status quo in place and guard it, otherwise you will not have peace. And as I said, there's advisory cost. Now this, by the way, this picture is quite interesting in its way. A long time ago, many centuries ago, the Sultan got really tired of the debate between the Christians about who did what in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And so and I think this was sort of magnificent. He sent his troops and they seized the key. And they gave it to a Muslim family. And they said to the Muslim family, it is your job to open the door in the morning, and it's your job to open. So if you get to the front of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre early enough in the morning, you will see this little procession. There's actually now two families involved. One carries the key and keeps it at night. And when they get to the door, he gives it to the other one and he opens it. The door opens, everybody goes in, all the tourists close the door. Comes the evening, they arrive with their sticks, everybody goes up and they close it. So this place is, you know, promotes behavior, the likes of which the prophets at the base of all these religions we've probably been quite surprised at. Now, what is the role of the Israelis and Palestinians? Well, the special regime is about the place, not the people. What the Israelis and Palestinian authorities about are the people, not the place. So that means that Israelis and Palestinians living there. And remember, this is embedded in a peace treaty. It presupposes a Palestinian state and two capitals. So the Israelis and Palestinians living in the old city remain citizens of their own countries. They don't become citizens of the Vatican or Andorra or Monaco, however much they might like to. And so all the normal rights of the person, political rights, citizenship, marriage rules, family rules, education, health care, all those things, people go to their own government for those things. And the systems are largely in place. Okay, I just got a message that I've got to speed up here. And it's a lot of capital, we're coming fairly close. So just to review, because there will be a multiple choice exam before you rely on the elements of what we described, and in much more detail than I can tell you about tonight, are the treaty, which then gives birth to something called the Governance Board, which is the Israelis, Palestinians, and Friends who oversee this special regime. They then in turn hire the chief administrator, and the chief administrator brings into, actually there's an existing religious leaders council with the chief rabbis, the Muslim and Christian leaders on it already that we have been talking to quite substantially. That comes into effect to provide guidance on all those things that relate to the religious practice. Then you need a police service and municipal services to handle the points of friction, the things that cause the trouble, and nothing else. And you need courts, and you need some dispute resolution mechanisms. And interestingly enough, there are some fairly sophisticated dispute resolution mechanisms in the old city that have come out of all three communities, in fact, that you would simply leave in place. And then you need a police services board to make sure that the police behavior is properly monitored. So this is what it looks like. Just a couple of other points, if I may. The real trick in doing this kind of work boils down to, so what? Are you going to be able to get your ideas to the negotiators and the decision makers on both sides? And that, from the very start, was something we were having worked in government, we were very conscious of how hard it is, even in Canada, let alone anywhere else, for scholars or NGOs or others to actually get their ideas translated into things that governments actually do.